What's up, guys? We're back with the CJ and Hiller podcast presented by True Health Company. This is episode 8. So, this episode is the Zach Hiller episode. So, Hiller is the co host here. He usually is running things a little more smoothly, but we're happy to get on here and spend time talking together about things we enjoy and try to make the world a little more informed about healthcare, self-care, and being the best version of ourselves. Okay. So our goal with this podcast is three things. We want to spend quality time having meaningful conversations. This is the opportunity for Hiller and I to catch up. So we spend about 15-20 minutes before we even start recording, catching up on each other's lives. And I think we use the podcast as an excuse to talk to each other, which is awesome. And so, number two, we share our stories about living a lifestyle that prioritizes health while still chasing goals in everyday life. And then three, the third one I think is super cool because that's what we're going to be talking about today. Share our unique perspective of having careers across spectrums of healthcare. I'm a physical therapist, Hiller's a nurse, and you're going to learn all about that today. And then how that impacts the way we view health and life overall. So if you like our conversations and learn from them, please share the episode, like the video below, and subscribe to the True Health Co. channel. All right. So today, like I said, Hiller is the episode. So we're going to learn, this is a little bit different perspective, right? So we're always trying to help make being healthy easier for people, but we are both in the healthcare world. So today we're just going to venture into that side of it a little bit, learn about Hiller's path, and really this episode for anyone that is interested in healthcare, anyone that is a nurse. Like, I love hearing Hiller's perspective on how he got to where he is. I lived with him in college, so I have the unique perspective of like getting to see all the beforehand work, right? Like all the experience he has now, like I got to see that early. I appreciate that a lot. I got family that are nurses and in healthcare too, so it's really cool to make those connections. And you guys are in for a treat today. Side note: this is recording number 2 of this episode, so we can blame myself for that one. So that's why I say I get the unique perspective of hearing everything a little bit over again, and couldn't be more happy. That's why we're redoing this episode. Okay, so a long-winded intro to Hiller, but really, Zach, just fill us in. Like, you're a nurse, you're going to dive more into that, but where are you now? Let's start there. Like, what do you do for work, and like what's your role in this big healthcare system, and then kind of bring it down more the day to day for us.
Where I am right now, I am 6.5 years into nursing career with various different types of experiences and professional and life experiences up to this point. And I work in a surgical intensive care unit, trauma surgical intensive care unit at a big hospital here in Minnesota. I said this on the last episode. I don't think I can say the name, so I'm not going to. With that being said, I have been here since 2020. This summer it will be 4 years already here in Minnesota. Before that, I was a nurse in Michigan for 2 years. And before that, I was going to school with Cole at Wartburg College, and then I went to Allen College for my nursing degree. I think a whopping 6 days, give or take a day. After I graduated Wartburg, I started my accelerator program in nursing. While at Wartburg, I knew I wanted to do something in medicine, but I did not know I wanted to do nursing until about my junior year, when the idea of becoming a flight nurse was introduced to me. It was introduced to me by my dad. My dad is retired now, but he used to work in law enforcement, and he worked closely with the flight nurses. And to me, it seemed like my dad calls them, you just work with them, and they're just bad mamma jammas, he would always say. They show up, everybody moves to the side, and they take over. It's literally they show up, they take over, and they are on the ground in the helicopter in minutes. And then they take off, take care of the patient on flight, and they arrive at the facility. And then they hand it off to the emergency and trauma doctors. So in school, I had an idea of to, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, went out to Michigan to get her master's. So I followed her out there, and I really wanted to start in pediatrics, the pediatric ICU at Mott's Children's Hospital over there in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, the University of Michigan. And they did not accept. I got a very kind letter emailed to me that said it was a rejection letter that said they don't accept new grads. And so I was like, okay, what? So one of my, you know, many rejections I've received in my professional career, but they're just, one door shuts, another door opens. So then I applied for a job at St. Joseph Mercy, Ann Arbor in Michigan, and worked on urology and neurosurgery specifically. So I get all the back surgery patients, all the confused patients, older people that had some neurological ailment or UTI. UTIs can make old people really confused. So got a lot of practice on working with confused patients because in general, on the general care floor, those of you who are thinking about going into nursing, it's a great place to start because you work on your time management and kind of figure out what kind of nurse you are. And with that, you have 5 to 6 patients on a day shift. And if you're new, you'll definitely get some practice at night shifts. Professionally, learning how to work at night is very different, especially for 12 hours. If you have a significant other and you work all night and then you come home and they've been sleeping all night and they're happy to see you and they're full of energy because they just slept all night and all you want to do is eat and sleep and you can't figure out which one you want to do more. So sometimes you fall asleep because you're so tired you can't even. I've literally fallen asleep over top of a cereal bowl because I am so tired from a night shift that I literally can't stay awake enough to eat. Not to scare you into getting nervous,
That's not scary. That's not scary at all.
but it's part of the job. So you gotta manage. I'll get into that stuff, but into
Mm-hmm.
managing how you take care of yourself. But so spent a year and a half on that floor, and during that time, I started working evening shift, so 3 p.m. to 11:30 ish p.m. And I'd get home at midnight and go to sleep. Uh, that was only the shift that was available. I needed to get into the nursing career. I need experience, so you just take what you can get, you run with
Mm-hmm.
it, and then any other experiences that are thrown at you, you try to take and run with it. And I know I'm talking a lot, Cole, so if you have questions, just go ahead and interrupt me.
No, yeah, I mean, the one thing that pops into my head is like, you've done a lot, you've seen it all, but like, you've thrown out there a couple times, like, plenty of rejection letters, right? Like, they wouldn't take a new grad, right? Like, fair, in a
Yeah.
specialty hospital, like, you've kind of bobbed and weaved your way and you're working through your timeline there, but you've kind of bobbed and weaved your way there. And then you've also talked about, like, not only the rejection letters, but like, then another door opens, right? Like, take every opportunity you can get. Like, where do you think that's played in, like, where you stand now? Or, can you talk more about that? Like, not, you do a good job of like flip-flopping those like negatives into positives, or like it seems like there's been plenty of both. Like, not
hmm
only are there the rejection letters, but it sounds like there's been some pretty cool opportunities too.
Yeah. I think because of those rejections, I have had those cool opportunities.
Hmm.
Because I didn't go down that way and, waste a lot of time down a particular pathway that might have not worked out. I headed down another one that opened up a lot of things for me, but I also kept the mindset continually of just being a sponge. I
Yeah.
think that I think that's a quality that I have developed professionally that's really helped and served me well. Is just, absorbing and taking in everything and then learning from it and moving on. And some of you learn then what not to do, and some
Hmm.
other stuff you learn, oh, that worked, okay, and continue to run with that. And that's a daily thing, what you learn not to do and what you learn to do.
Yeah.
So what opportunities did that allow me to do going forward?
Yeah.
I eventually, after that general care, I got into the ICU out in Michigan. Spent a year there. Then uh, COVID happened, and they made a makeshift ICU there that you were voluntold that you were going to go up into this saran wrapped plastic isolated ICU, one way in, and you didn't leave the unit till you're done at the end of your shift. They had food in the back corner of a meeting room for you
Wow.
that you would eat, and then you'd go back out in your hazmat suits and stay in those all day until you ended your shift, and then you'd go to the locker room, disrobe. You had the option to rinse. You wanted to take a shower, otherwise you threw your stuff in a bag and you threw it down a chute, and then you take your personal stuff, throw it into a trash bag, Lysol it, zip it up, bring it home, and throw it in the trash. And then at that time they were locking down borders and stuff, and Dakota and I picked a great time to. Well, I had a job interview and was already accepted
Hmm.
in Minnesota, and so it was already planned. But we moved from Michigan to Minnesota in 2020, and
This is kind of where it gets wild, right?
yeah, and so
Everything's. I mean, welcome COVID. I mean, does that talking about that, like bringing that up, does that like send chills? Is that like,
yeah, I mean,
oh,
I got a pretty good, I don't know, pretty good memory because some of the stuff I remember, like, why do I remember that? But
right?
like some of the things I can just visualize, and that's one of those things. It's like I can picture myself on that unit
Hmm.
like it was yesterday. Also, I can picture myself, Dakota and I, driving from Michigan in separate cars. I'm pulling the U-Haul. Dakota has the dogs in her car, and we're driving, and we're talking to each other through walkie-talkie apps on our phone, hoping that we don't run into a closed down gas station if we have to stop because they were shutting down everything.
Right.
We were hoping that we wouldn't run across law enforcement at the border because we have to cross over 1, 2, 3 borders to get our way over here. That they're going to ask us what our means for travel were. Uh,
Right.
so that was, it's part of the story. It was
Right.
we learned, and we weren't stopped at all. We
Hmm.
actually met quite a few people out when we were at gas stations.
Nice.
So
Kind of refreshing.
yeah, so we're like, oh, I don't feel like the apocalypse so much
Yeah.
driving nobody else out here. So that was my experience in Michigan. Then
Hmm.
we went to Minnesota, and things just kept rolling.
What were your big takeaways in Michigan as far as the nursing side? You know, you went from a new grad to a totally different territory, a totally different state, a totally different, um, specialty, a couple different specialties while you were there. Like now you're moving back to home, Minnesota, and a couple of years of experience under your belt. Like, what were your biggest takeaways? In going from new grad to like, okay, hey, now I'm a nurse in the profession, and like not this.
I think my first thought is I can do this. I can keep doing this job.
It's got
Uh,
to help for all those young nurses out there for sure.
yeah, I just know that I've worked with a lot of young nurses, and I try to put myself in their shoes when I'm asked to like be a preceptor or uh, there's a student, not even somebody who's going to be working for us, but a student or somebody there shadowing the unit,
Hmm.
and I'm asked to be the person to show them, I guess, the person to represent our unit and show them. And, it kind of speaks for two things, but I try to put myself in their shoes to be like, hey, when I was in your shoes, these
Hmm.
are the things that I looked at. These are the things that I wish I would have known. Uh,
Hmm.
these are the things that I worried about that I really didn't need to worry about. I should have been worrying about this.
Yeah.
And everybody told me when I first started, it's gonna take a year for you to feel comfortable. Take a year for you to feel comfortable. And and so I was like, okay. When I asked someone, I'm like, so what can I do to feel comfortable?
Hmm.
And I got a wide range of advice, but some people were saying like show up and work and ask a lot of questions.
Hmm.
Um, put yourself in uncomfortable positions. Like try to, if there's something going on, try to be a part of it. Like there's something like people are getting together outside of work, like go and hang out with them or find out more about the people you work with, like as just a human being
Yeah.
person instead of just who you work with.
Yeah.
Because you really like, unless it's kind of prompted, you don't really talk about people's lives, the people you work with, people you
Hmm.
spend a lot of time with. You don't ever like, at least when I first started, no one's like, "Hey, how's this? How you doing?" And you didn't really check in with yourself. You're too busy worrying about taking care of everybody else, which I found out being 6.5 years in now. It helps a lot if you just uh, check in with the people that you work with to make sure at least they're doing okay. But at the same time, what other what other stressors you got going on in your life. So
Right.
the advice to those new kids that come in, I just say like, just you know, ask a lot of questions professionally about stuff, especially if you don't understand,
Hmm.
and then um, be interested in your coworkers, um, and ask them what's going on because you're going to be spending, you know, a lot of nurses that are go getters. They start in the ICU and they want to get their 2 years of ICU experience so that they can apply for CRNA school, and then they skedaddle out of there. But
Hmm.
not is like that, and even if that means 2 years is still a long time to be working with somebody.
For
So you
sure.
just want to get to know them, and I left my unit that I'm working on right now for a little while to pursue a dream that I had that didn't end up working out. Uh, but I still ask people how they're doing, check in with them. I just feel like the camaraderie you can build, like a sports team that you work with. At least that's where I take my experience being on sports teams.
Yeah.
That it can that can translate to your professional life.
For sure. That's what when you were talking, like that's what I was had in my head It's like, you're a sports guy. You were, a quarterback, a leader, right? Like it's very much like those are your teammates, right? And if there's stressors there, then there's going to be friction, and if there's friction, there's problems, and so it's the same thing. Like those are your teammates, and you want to take care of them. And it's cool hearing that. Like it's the simple things, and like we're just probably figuring that out, right? The with the lower number of years, right? But we've had some cool opportunities too, so we can kind of reflect on that. And you almost use those first 2 years. It sounds like you kind of like use those first 2 years as like the lessons now.
Mhm.
Like you didn't know they were lessons then, but then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, now that you see other people in those situations, like you can take yourself back to that, and like you use that time frame to reflect and learn, almost like learn the lessons now rather than
Yeah.
back then, which is super cool. So,
I think that this is when I compare it to being a quarterback. I think when you first start out in nursing, you're so tunnel visioned and you're so worried about just what the heck is 4 feet in front of you,
hmm
so focused that when you have worked for a while, that ends up being more of, okay, I've done this, now I can see the whole field. And then
hmm
now that I've been working, now I know my play, what my players are doing. And then I've been in the field even longer, and now I know what the defense is doing and what my players are doing. And then we've been in
hmm
the field even longer, I know what I'm doing, my players are doing, what the defense is doing, and I have an audible ready to change the. And then you're in the field even longer, and the
hmm
game slows down so slow that you can predict stuff happening before it happens. And that's like the comparison that I like to make it to. The longer that I'm in nursing, you that's me having that experience. That's what I
Yeah,
compare it to, and the similarities are there's a lot of them.
for sure, for sure. I mean, it's the only way to do it is to gain more experience, right? And that's kind of what you said earlier, is like ask a lot of good questions, like always be learning, like put your guard down. The only way to learn more is to like always be learning or always feel like a beginner, so to speak. Like as soon as you put your guard up, like there's no taking that next step. There's no like expanding out into like, well, I'm going to learn what the defense is doing, so to speak, or I'm going to learn the audibles because you got your guards up. It's like you have to expose yourself, and that's hard,
Mm,
but then, like, it's almost so simple. Like, that's coming together, like, right now as we're talking. Like, the only way to always be learning is to always be learning.
yeah, and how do you do that,
Right.
right? People do that in various ways, right? We got the book nerds, we got people that watch videos, people that read articles, people that love to work and just get their hands on and learn by
hmm
getting on things. There's people who spend time outside of work, working on other things. There's people who go to school while they are working. There's various ways to do it. You got to figure out what you want to do. But nursing is a career that your licensure requires you to do continuing education to maintain that licensure. And if you don't, you can be audited and they can come after you and make you give proof that you have been doing things to continuing to advance yourself or at least maintain your nursing brain your
Right.
that you have.
That's cool. That's cool. So I'll spin it a little bit. You're always learning. You've mentioned a couple times, like it's a very stressful environment. Like you sign me up to work overnights, like no thank you, right? But it's part, like you said, like it's part of the profession. And not only are you working overnights, but you have to be at the top of your game. You're making like intensive care, decisions, right? So how do you balance that? Like I'll throw myself under the bus and say, like, relatively to what we're talking about, spectrums of healthcare, like Mine's pretty laid back, right? It's during the day. It's ambulatory. It's outpatient services. It's relatively a little more for you. So then my life stays a little more balanced outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage that intensity both in work but then also outside of work with crazy hours, crazy intense work schedules, stuff like that? Like to me, if I was a nurse or I was getting into it, like not the work itself, but like just that dynamic sounds challenging. Like, what do you do for that?
Um, well, you learn what works by trial and error. I'll say that first. I had a great experience at school where I had what's it called? Clinical. My end clinical, I had to get like 160 hours at the end, and it was a night shift, and I
Hmm.
was at class the next day because they had to cram it in. So I would sleep in my car in the parking lot, and then go to class because otherwise I had to drive a half hour back home and a half hour back to class, and that's an hour of sleep I would miss. So I'd sleep for 2.5 hours after class, after internship or clinical or whatever, and then I would go to class, and then I go home and sleep and then study again. But through the trial and error being nurse, for me, finding um, exercise, there's
Hmm.
many benefits on that. We talked about that. Also, if you don't believe us, just go to Google Scholar and thousands of articles talking about how important exercise is in, but especially people who work shift work and their sleep schedule is not consistent. Um, I prioritize sleep. I think sleep is my superpower. If I get enough sleep, I can work. I can work hours and work 16-hour shifts. I feel good. So I
That's
say
awesome.
prioritize your sleep, um, and then bring snacks with you. You're always up on your feet. I'm not always the greatest at this, but like
Yeah.
what always talks about, just have a handful of nuts in your pocket, like
Hmm.
almonds or something or protein bar or
Yeah.
something that you can eat literally on the go or as you're charting, or something that you can literally throw in your mouth, chewing as you're walking to go to the next room, finish it, swallow it, walk in the room, do what you need to do in the patient's room, that
Wow.
type. Um,
Mhm.
and then, so yeah, sleep, snacks, and then to have exercise that helps. The fourth factor doesn't apply to everybody, but um, if you don't live with the support system, find a mentor at
Hmm.
work that you can complain to, ask questions to. If you had a rough day, talk about stuff, because this is an intense environment in the medical field.
Yeah.
So have a mentor to go to. I have a great support system in my wife that I can talk to.
Hmm.
Helps, but not everybody has that person. So a mentor. I also have a mentor at work too. A couple of
Nice.
them like
Yeah.
that I talk to,
Yeah.
and just to ask questions about. So that as well. And then with the medical field, just nursing used to be an eat your young type welcome to the profession,
Yeah.
and it's really changing. But there's some of the senior nurses out there that still kind of act that way to new nurses. So I
Yeah.
kind of myself in the role to like be that shepherd, not be the wolf and not be the lamb. That's like, do. So like kind of in between being the shepherd to help these young, be like, no, it's not really like this up here, but
Right.
you can be successful up on this floor if you do these things and type like that. And don't I always say, don't act like you know it all. Ask a lot of questions. Being in the preceptor role, sometimes I really realize how much I don't know, And then I have to take a couple steps back and be like, man, like, do I really know what I'm doing? And then I sometimes spiral into some negative self-talk, and then I get myself out of that. I'm like, no, I do know what I'm talking about. I just look it up real quick, refresh myself, and I'll be good to go. Like
Right.
my role is not to know everything. Um,
There you go.
so I've told my patients multiple times, I don't know, but I'll find somebody. I'll find out the answer for you.
Right.
Uh, my humility has paid off a lot because I I realized a long time ago I don't know everything.
That's cool. I think that goes a long way. Um, Tying that into like what you like about it, right? The last couple of years, we've talked about COVID. Healthcare in general is
Mm,
tough. I'll say tough. I'll leave it at tough for a thousand different reasons. But also at the same time, I tell my patients all day, every day, like, also, like, thank goodness we have what we have. Like, we can do some amazing things, some incredible things, um, and we're thankful for that. So keeping it positive, because it would be easy to go the other way, but like, what is the most positive thing about not only being a nurse, but like, what's the most positive thing for you about being in healthcare?
I get to see people from all walks of life, and I get to hear all kinds of stories about what people have gone through, and find out that there's a lot of really good people out there, and there's a lot of people with heart out there that really want the best in people. And
Hmm.
it's good to know because you don't hear that a lot in the news. But there's a lot of really good people out there that want the best, and they come to get answers. And I like being able to be a problem solver and give them answers, even though sometimes the answers that they get are not what they're looking for. It
Right.
does send us down a pathway where we can try to treat a problem as
Yeah.
opposed to still trying to figure out what the problem is. So I like being able to be a part of the solution and help people out. But also when being in the trauma ICU is where I'm at right now, currently in Minnesota, is gives me a whole unique perspective on just lives of people
Yeah.
and what trauma does to families, and just the tens of 20 of 30 things that we take advantage every day that can be changed in seconds. And I see
Hmm.
that in my job. And it's going to sound kind of bad, cynical, the way I'm thinking about it. But when those people go through that, I'm able to learn from it without having to go through it myself.
That's fair. You
And
gain, you gain a lot of experience through caring for that situation.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, just like I'll just give one example because I could give hundreds. But like if something like this were to happen to me, Dakota, my wife, I don't want you to do this.
Hmm.
See how this affects families, affects people, affects the spouse. If this happens to me,
Hmm.
this is what I want you to do.
Yeah. Right.
Which, if I didn't have seen these things happen multiple times, I would know as well. But I would necessarily want being the person that takes care of them.
For sure. Yeah.
Uh, so I there's a lot of great things about healthcare, and they're not talked about as much because the system needs work. Everybody knows that. We don't need to talk about that.
Hmm.
Are a lot of really good people in healthcare trying to do a lot of good things, trying to have research to change and make things. It's a slow moving wheel, and we're trying to get things to new research, new medicine to spit out faster, and and people work a lot of overtime hours to help people, and it's just not talked about,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate. But I just plain and simple, I like being in a position of control to help people.
Yeah.
Not saying that I need to have control, because I work in a chaotic place, so I don't have control most of the time. But if I'm able to have control to help people, I prefer, that's where I like to be. So that's why I know I'm in the right spot.
Yeah.
And if
That's
you're able
cool.
to do that, you like helping people, um, medical field has a lot of places for you, and nursing is always hiring.
Yeah. Yeah. And people that don't know, like, can't appreciate how, like, unsurprising of an answer that is, just because you're like simply the most positive person out there,
Hmm.
and like always come with that positive outlook, that positive attitude, and like always looking for the next best thing and not the next problem, but the next solution. And so, and then the people that are listening that do know that, like they have to know that, like, your ability to help and make people feel better in those situations, like, those patients are super lucky. They've been put into that situation and for a very unlucky reason. But they got the best of the best taking care of them for sure. So cool, man. Well, it's cool to hear your path. It's cool to hear, your unique perspective of healthcare, and knowing that people are being taken care of by someone like you kind of makes the world a better place. That's for sure.
Thank you. It's cool to look back and see how much I've learned and how much I've gained from this profession, right? And it's
Yeah,
only been 6.5 years.
yeah. You're just getting started.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I talk about with new grads or new nurses about stuff that I did, and then they ask me, well, how long have you been a nurse? And well, 6.5 years. And it's like, holy cow, I've really done quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier, like I try to take every opportunity. So if there's things that offered, I would sign up for it, whether I would get it or not.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll leave with is, if you're out there, statistically females, because there's more ladies in nursing than guys, uh, but guys out there too. If you're looking to apply for a job in nursing and you don't meet the minimum requirements, still apply. Because I did that for my dream job 2 times and was rejected both times. But my philosophy was that when they are looking at my resume and rejecting it, they're seeing my name.
Hmm.
And so the third time I sent it in, when I met the requirements, I got accepted. And my dream job was to be a flight nurse. It didn't end up panning out, which I had to make a big life decision, which
Hmm.
was, it's part of life. But it ended up not feeling like my dream job, like I thought it was going to feel.
Yeah.
I'm back in the surgical ICU, but that would be my bit to leave with your advice. If you think that you don't meet, just do it anyway.
Yeah. Shoot for the moon.
Yeah,
If you're not qualified for it, try it anyway.
yeah.
And
I mean,
and, and I think, if you're not qualified for it, try it anyway, because the rejection will also kind of lead to the path of, like, okay, why now? Right? Like, where's the gap?
hmm and
Right?
and and who decides what the requirements are?
Right.
So, like, is it the person interviewing you, or is it is it somebody higher up? Like,
Hmm.
who's making the baseline requirements for you to apply for that job? And maybe there's something out. My luck has come from not what they see on paper,
Hmm.
but from when I can get in front of them and talk to them.
Yeah.
So, like, I just want to be able to talk to them. So if I don't meet the minimum requirements, I'm not saying go full loose cannons and apply for, you know, like a nurse practitioner job, and you don't have an advanced nurse practitioner degree.
Right.
Now, I think that you're taking my words and you're trying
Mm-hmm.
flipping them around.
Right.
What I'm saying is that as a nurse and applying for a job that you have the degree with, but they have other requirements that are not related to a degree, then
Hmm.
I check every one of those boxes. Because there's people out there that when they're for a job, they want to make sure they check every single box before they apply.
Hmm.
And there's a lot to learn in training. So there's something that you've been thinking about applying for, and you're like, oh well, I don't quite have this done. The worst thing they're going to say is no.
No, that's awesome.
That's all I got.
Well, we appreciate it. Hearing that perspective and learning more about you is always a good time, and especially the profession that you're in. You're good at it. You're good at what you do, and so to put it out there and let other people learn from it is always appreciated. So I'll end with last question. You don't have to go into it. You don't have to explain it, but if we're talking all about this journey of being a nurse, being in healthcare, if you weren't a nurse, what different career path would you have chose?
I'll make it really short. Watch the timer here. My dad was a police officer, and for the
Hmm.
long time, he was going to be a police officer.
Nice.
And then, if it wasn't for that, then I would be in some sort of coaching,
Yeah.
maybe some sort of sports related psychology or something.
Yeah. Surprise. Every single one of those things has to do with helping other people.
Mm-hmm. Feel like that's
Just,
what that's what we're meant to do, right?
that's
People
fair.
people helping people.
That's fair. That's you. You are like the epitome of that and crush it. So I'm not surprised that if you weren't doing it in nursing, you'd be doing something else. So we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome. A great episode. Everybody, comment down below how awesome it was to listen to Hiller. Like, subscribe. Let us know who are we going to interview next. All right. Good talking to you. Hiller. Talk to you soon.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.